Hello book lovers and welcome to Book Talk Radio Club. My name is Claire Harris and today I'm talking to Nathan Bush. Nathan is the author of the Foley Chronicles, Files from the 8th District, what he calls a faith-based crime series with an attitude. Nathan has been writing since middle high school, where he was involved with the school newspaper and literary magazine, but didn't publish his first full-length novel until 2016. His goal in writing is simply to entertain his readers and to grow a loyal fan base to spread the word about his stories. He currently resides in Alabama with his wife and 5 children, where he landed after his enlistment in the Army came to a conclusion. He and his wife spent 10 years working with teenagers in the church before moving on to devote more time to their special needs daughter. Hi Nathan, welcome and thank you for coming to talk to me on Book Talk Radio Club.
Hey Claire, I appreciate you having me on here.
Oh, my pleasure. Nathan, you described the Foley Chronicles, Files from the 8th District, as a faith-based crime series with an attitude. Can you explain faith-based and with an attitude, please?
Well, I kind of struggled with how I was going to describe my series because I didn't want it just to be a crime fiction series. But it's the stories, while being typical murder investigations, which is what my characters deal with all the time, is the fact that one of the main character of my series is a very devoted Christian. He gets all of his morals and ethics straight from his learning from the Bible, and he is prone to answer questions whenever people have problems with scripture references and all that entails. So that's where the faith-based part comes in. Plus that it's what people would consider clean because there's no foul language or anything like that in. But I call it I label it as having an attitude because it's not a straight Christian story. There's murders in every book. I sometimes go into detail about how the people are taken out, and some of the other characters in the series are not religious like the main character is.
The Foley Chronicles, Files from the 8th District. Tell me about Foley. Does this town come from your imagination or does it actually exist?
No, it's actually all straight from my head. Now there is a town in Alabama called Foley, but I didn't base it off of that. There's really not a state per se that I've labeled the city in. That way I can have whatever kind of weather and everything happen there. If you choose a state, you're limited on what happens weather-wise and certain other things. So I decided to go with a completely fictional city for my backdrop.
Yeah, I can understand that. Then you can make everything up as you go along. Absolutely. So this is a crime series. Does it have the same detective featured in each book, much like many other crime series, or different detectives but from the same department?
Yeah, in book 1, I laid out who most of the characters are in this district where all these stories take place. A couple of them have changed from book 1 until now. I basically had some characters that I used in book 1 that have since gone away to make room for new characters. But how I do my stories is in each book I tell the story from the perspective of a detective and from the killer that's doing the dastardly deeds in each book. So there's in both sides are written from a first person perspective. So while there's the the same detectives in most of the stories, what I've done is in each book I've told this story from a different detective's point of view. So you're not hearing the story from the same detective every time, even though all of them interact throughout the books.
Let's talk about your first two books in the series, Written in Blood and Root of Evil, and we'll cover the other two books in your next interview. Written in Blood, your first book in the Foley Chronicles, Files from the 8th District. Can you give Book Talk Radio Club's listeners a short synopsis of the story, please?
Oh, that one is it's about a young detective. He's been in the police department for a couple of years as just a patrol officer. But where this story takes place, it's the end of his rookie year being in the homicide division, and he has a myriad of issues that he has to deal with through the course of the book while they're tracking down this sadistic killer who is killing prostitutes.
So here we have two detectives, Detective Kennedy Collins and John Filcher. Tell me about their characters. What kind of men are they? What drives them?
Well, Ken he's the main character from the first book. He's the one that's the rookie. He battles some internal problems that he's had since youth. His mother was murdered when he was young, and his father has been an alcoholic and drug addict most of his life. So that's where he's gotten a lot of his root issues from. He was in the military. I used a little bit of background there for him, just to help with some development on him. But he has, like I say, he's got some internal issues that he has to deal with. He also has some external issues with physical health and stuff like that he battles with in the book. He's searching for something more than what he's got. And John Filcher is his senior partner, John Filcher is he's the Christian character that's the main character through the whole series. So he looks up to him in a lot of things, and he always has questions for him. And his drive really is just he wants to always do what's right, but he doesn't always do that. Some of the struggles that he has because of his background. But on the other side is John Filcher. He's the senior detective of the whole series. And his main drive is to spread his knowledge of the gospel, and his religion to those around him. He's not what some people would call a Bible thumper. He doesn't beat people over the head with it, but anytime there's questions thrown his way, he will use Scripture as his basis for why he answers the way he does. He's a pretty straight-laced officer. He does everything by the book. He is a mentor to many young officers in the department. Even some of his fellow officers that are his same age, they go to him with questions. He's a highly respected police officer in the whole police department. So he's got a lot on his shoulders with carrying the load for all these people in my book.
Eddie, the serial killer, what's his backstory, without giving too much away, of course?
Eddie is a very dark man. He has, like Ken, he has some of his own mental issues. He's got a bad background. He grew up in a very bad home. He lives in perpetual darkness mostly. And when the story opens and he's introduced, he's been locked away for years now his misfortunes on young Detective Kennedy Collins. So not only does he want to get out of where he's locked away from so he can take care of who he blames for his whole life, he also wants to get out and just kill people in general because that's the kind of guy he is.
One of your reviewers says, and I quote, Nathan creates some of the most demented serial killers, taking us inside their perspective to understand why they do what they do. How on earth do you, as a good family man, manage to get inside the head of a demented serial killer? You must have a very dark side lurking about, Nathan.
Yeah, just you can ask my wife about that. After I wrote the first book and she read it, she always jokes around saying that she could never look at me the same again because she never knew that was in there. But probably, aside from having an imagination, I wasn't always a Christian man. So growing up as just a regular kid and teenager, I did things that I wasn't supposed to do, saw things I shouldn't have seen. So I think I didn't come to salvation until I was in my early 30s. So I had multiple years of baggage to call upon for digging things out of what was buried in my head to be able to plant in these people.
Root of Evil is the second book in the Foley Chronicles, Files from the 8th District. A man is found bludgeoned to death and his motel room ransacked. Nothing at the scene suggests what the killer was after. To add to the mystery, his body is riddled with odd-shaped markings. This sounds really good. Tell me more.
Well, the second book is one that I used to introduce a couple of new characters. Like I said, some of the ones that were in the first book, I don't want to say I did away with them, but they just went on with their lives elsewhere. So I used Root of Evil to introduce a new partner for John Filcher. He's what I call from out west, basically from where I perceive Foley to be. He's from somewhere close to the West Coast, and he calls himself that he's a cliche, really, because he's a real Western guy.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to acclimate to the big city living like he's not used to. So it was kind of fun bringing him into a city the size of Foley, where he was used to living in just the rural areas of the western United States. So it was a treat for him to learn how to do investigations as strictly a homicide detective instead of just being a deputy sheriff where he came from, where he had mundane jobs to do here and there. So that was interesting for me as well as for him.
I bet. So this is Detective Quinn Butler, yeah? He's the new guy in the homicide division of Foley's 8th District. Do you base your detective characters on someone you know, or are they an amalgam of people?
The majority of the characters that I have are pretty much made up. There is one that is based off of someone that was in my life for many years when I was younger. That I imagine this is how that person would be now if they were still around.
Uh-huh.
I haven't really talked to a lot of people about it, but John Filcher is actually based off of my uncle, who passed away at a relatively young age, and he was even though I wasn't saved back then, he was a strong influence on me with his Christian walk. So that's basically where John came from, and the rest of them are just kind of bits and pieces of things I've seen and people I've known from here and there.
Why a crime series in particular? Was there an author, a book, or a film that inspired you to write in this genre?
Well, if I would have started writing, um, if I would have started doing not full time, right, but writing full books back in high school, I probably would have went a different direction. But the older I got, without doing writing, I was influenced a lot by cop shows on television. Um, but the one thing that actually drove me into writing was I read a book by Randy Alcorn that was one of three books in a series that was a detective story. And for some reason, when I got done reading it, I was just like, well, hey, I think I could do that. So that's where the crime came from.
Nathan,
Other people might argue that I can't. So.
Nathan, what would you say you have learned about writing in the 4 years since Written in Blood was published in 2016 and Praying Games, which was published last year in July 2020?
Probably what I've learned is it's not an easy thing to do, regardless of what some people think. I've talked to a lot of people that don't do writing, that really don't comprehend the level of stress and work that goes into writing a book. So really, how hard it is something I've learned. I've also learned that I do not like marketing, and I do not like editing. But I've also learned there's a lot of people out there who are willing to help because they've all been through it before. So it's not an exclusive group because there are so many people that write, but it's a group that you can find a lot of great people and a lot of great help.
Absolutely. Now let's talk a bit about you, Nathan Bush, ex-army man, husband and father to 5 children, and author, of course. You have a blog where you share short stories in various genres, life ramblings, a few book reviews, an occasional devotional, and some insight on life with an ASD child. As I was reading the blog post, one in particular stood out for me, and it actually choked me up, I might add. It's titled "To the Mother of My Non-Typical Child" and is absolutely beautiful, full of love and gratitude for your wife. Tell me about your non-typical child.
I don't know that we have enough time for that.
All right, well, give us a brief idea.
There's a lot that goes into raising a non-typical child. Not that my typical children were pieces of cake, but there's a lot of unknowns. But there's also there's a lot of love, a lot of inspiration. I've learned perseverance and patience that I never knew I had. And even though my typical children, they did everything when kids normally do them, not to take anything away from them, it's an even bigger achievement when your non-typical child reaches a milestone.
Sure.
And I have learned that anybody that's non-typical, they are just as smart as any typical child. They can love you just as much. They can entertain you just as much.
Sure.
They can break your heart just as much. They can melt your heart just as much. But probably just the determination that she shows in everything is probably something that sticks with me more than anything.
So what do your children think of their dad being an author?
Well, my oldest daughter, she's big fan of mine. She reads every book that I write. Our second youngest daughter, she thinks it's great that I write.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them I'm not too sure about. They don't do a whole lot of reading.
Uh-huh.
They've never really said anything to me about it. So I mean, it's probably both ends of the spectrum really on how they feel about it.
Your blog is called Right Here, Right Now, clever play on words as both are spelt with a W-R. But it's your tagline that interests me. Not every story ends with happily ever after. So very true. In fact, does any life story end with happily ever after? I guess it's our perspective, isn't it? What was the thought behind that tagline?
That's actually the tagline that I have for my series.
Uh-huh.
Really, because I write crime stories, and not every bad guy gets put in jail, and not every family lives happily ever after they've been torn apart. That's basically the backstory for that.
Would you like to give out your blog link so people can find and read it?
Yeah, it's I don't even know if I can remember it. I don't hardly ever log out of it, so all I have to do is click on that. See, I've got it written down. It's in the back of my book, I believe. But it's on WordPress, and the blog is www.nathanswritingagain@wordpress.com.
Lovely.
It's all lowercase.
Mm-hmm. You have some fabulous reviews for the Foley Chronicles, Files from the 8th District, amongst them being a fantastic storyline that keeps you gripped all the way through. And this was a great read. I really admire the author for his originality and courage. Also, Christian crime fiction at its best. Which encourages you to write the next in the series, Nathan? The sales or the reviews?
Well, I don't have a whole lot of sales, so I guess I can't really say that. I love reading my reviews, whether they're good or bad. I take all of them to heart because it just. I mean, I don't take the bad ones to heart because I know that what I write's not going to appeal to everybody, and they might click on one of my books and not really think about what they're getting into. But I take them to heart as far as using that to try to do better when I do the next one. But really, neither sales nor reviews pushes me on my writing. I mean, I want to put stuff out that people want to read, and I love the fact that the people that do leave reviews leave them, because that just means that my book actually meant something enough to them for them to put some thoughts together on it. But really, what drives me to write is just the fact that I have so much crammed in my head.
And it's got to go somewhere.
I know, I know a lot of writers have pages and pages of ideas like I do for what they want to put out. So really, I think if I didn't keep writing, then my head would explode just from how much piles up in there.
Well, we don't want that happening, so carry on writing. So, lastly, where can people purchase the Foley Chronicles, Files from the 8th District?
All of my stuff is on Amazon. You can also find it on Barnes & Noble and just about any place that Amazon sends it to. But I actually have a URL that goes to my Amazon page, and all of my books are all linked together in a series on Amazon.
All right. Well, thank you, Nathan. That was great. I look forward to chatting with you again. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Book Talk Radio Club. Lovely to speak to you, Nathan.
Thank you. looking forward to the next one as well.
Cool. All right. Speak to you soon.